My name is Yumiko Asayama, Chief Manager of Japan Water Forum and Coordinator of Asia Pacific Water Forum as a Secretariat. This session is Asia-focused end-to-end approach for valuing water on climate action. We will organize this section together with our Vice Governing Council chairs and 6 speakers. Firstly, please give me the opportunity to introduce what is Asia Pacific Water Forum, which is coordinator of Asia Focus session of Stockholm World Water Week 2022. Asia Pacific Water Forum is an independent and non-profit multi-stakeholders network. The objective of APWF is to raise the priority of tackling water security issues highlighted in the development agenda of Asia Pacific region to enhance the knowledge for heads of states and government about the importance to address water security issue as a development issue of each country in Asia Pacific region, and enhance their cooperation and investment for tackling water security issue in their country and regional level. Our APWF work together with various organizations in our region and globally to address the issue in line with various aspects of Asia Pacific region. And our Asia Pacific Water Forum is managed and organized together with our Governing Council chair and vice chairs. Today, we are working this session together with the vice chair of APWF, but unfortunately, we missed Mr. Pasco, Chief Executive Officer of International Water Center, since 10 days ago because of his health issue. We are supposed to organize this session together with Mr. Pasco, but that's not happen anymore. But we devote our effort to him to realize water resilient, inclusive, sustainable development in Asian Pacific region, including enhancing the making talenting opportunity for youth generation. That was his concern. And today's session is also one of our initiatives to devote to him. 4 months ago, we organized together with Asia Pacific Water Summit in Kumamoto, Japan, and online by inviting heads of states and government of Asian Pacific region and international organizations. We jointly adopted the Kumamoto Declaration to address water security issue and going for more quality-oriented society in Asian Pacific to satisfy the needs for resilient, inclusive, and sustainable society. We, together with heads of states and government, voluntarily commit to improve governance for climate resilience. Because Asia Pacific region is most disaster-prone region, and many countries experience some of the most damaging disaster even within these 2 years. So systematic change to accelerate the action to develop climate resilient societies in sustainable, inclusive, and resource economic circular proof is urgently needed by examining how to promote an end-to-end approach with the interaction of science, engineering, socio-economic approach. So in this session, 6 speakers will present their initiative, good practice, and the lesson learned from their effort to enhancing understanding water value and manage water resources. So this session consists of presentation and panel discussion. Now we move on to the presentation, and the first presenter is Dr. Oriana Romano, OECD. So now I would like to invite Dr. Oriana. Floor is for yours.
Thank you very much, Yumiko, and I'm happy to contribute to this session. I'm trying to share the screen, but apparently I have the host disabled participant screen sharing, so I wouldn't be able to do so. If you can give me the host.
Okay, Tsunemune-san, can you share Oriana's presentation?
Okay, please wait for a second.
Sure, thank you. So I lead the OECD Water Governance Program, and today my presentation to contribute to this session on valuing water on climate action will focus in particular on a new project that we launched at the OECD on sustainable, resilient, inclusive, and circular blue economy. In order to show that water is a means for sustainable growth, and in order to do so, water governance has, of course, an important role to play. So if we go to the next slide, please, we can see that the blue economy is a driver of urban and regional development. The blue economy which includes fishing, coastal tourism, port activities, but also biotechnology and research and many other activities, represent 5% of the world GDP. Some studies saying that the blue economy, if it was a country, it could be part of the G7. So it's really a huge industry we are talking about. And in some Asian countries, like Indonesia, for example, it accounts for up to 20% of the GDP. So globally, the value of the conservative estimated value of the ocean economy is up to $1.5 trillion per year. And it's also an important source of job for more than 3 billion people, depending on ocean for their livelihoods. And also beyond the direct impact on the economy, if we look at the blue economy from conservation and preservation perspective and a series of ecosystem services, they account for 1.5 of value of services provided for biodiversity per GDP globally. In the next slide, we can see that I try to show that the blue economy has an important economic value, but what we have to consider is that there cannot be economic resilience without water resilience. And if we consider mega trends like climate change, urbanization, by the way, more than 60% of the Asian and Pacific population will be urban by 2050. And if we consider demographic growth, then most of the cities and many of them in the Asia Pacific area will be increasingly exposed to the risks of too much, too little, and too polluted water. More than 3.4 billion people could live in water-stressed area by 2050 in Asia Pacific. And if we look at the city specifically, more than 570, previous slide, please. More than 570 low-lying coastal cities will face a sea level rise by 2050, putting 800 million people at risk. There is also the risk of too little water, so drought, which we have seen as one of the major increasing risk in cities. So if we consider this impact of drought on economic activities that depends on oceans and sea, so the blue economy, this could reduce the potential of a city's economic growth by 12%. We also have a risk of too polluted water. We run a survey across 50 cities from the OECD and non-OECD countries to identify what are the major challenges for urban water governance. And we found out that for 70%, 75% of respondents, water pollution is a challenge. But water pollution is also related to other sources of pollution, for example, in relation to waste. So when it comes to ocean pollutions and sea pollution, most of the sources are derived on land. So it's very much needed to see this systemic and connected approach across different policies. Next slide, please. So once we set up this picture in terms of economic value of activities depending on water and the need to connect them to water resilience, so what is the solution that we are suggesting? The solution is that we would need to support countries, cities, regions, and basin in defining a risk, we call it a risk-proof approach to the blue economy, whereby risk stands for resilient, inclusive, sustainable, and circular blue economy. So very quickly, in terms of resilience, of course, we have seen the impact of many shocks in the last few years, from the COVID-19 to the Ukraine-Russian war. And this has an important impact on water and related activities, whether it comes to managing water resources, to access to quality water and sanitation services. So it is very much important to cope with shocks and risks and make sure that the blue economy's activities can be prepared to respond to them. In case of the inclusiveness, well, the ocean economy provides 4.5 million direct jobs only in Europe. And there are increasing opportunities for a number of activities, so for example, in relation to the bioresearch, but at the same time, beyond providing the room for a just transition, we also have to take into account that those risks that I mentioned are likely to impact the most vulnerable people. So whether many people are employed in fishery, tourism, port activities, if we don't consider the link with protection with increasing water securities, then there would be the most vulnerable population will be likely to be impacted by water-related risk. Sustainability, it's an important component, especially in relation to climate change, if we consider that over 70% of the consequences of climate change manifest themselves in water. So preservation of natural ecosystem through nature-based solution could and should be taken into account. And finally, allow me to mention circularity, as 80% of marine pollution comes from land-based sources. So it is very much important to close material loops. Next and last slide is just to mention that this is very important if we want to reach risk-proof blue economy, resilient, inclusive, sustainable, and circular blue economy. We cannot do so without proper water governance at the right scale. In 2021, we launched as a part of the Asian Development Bank AIDO, we launched a paper on water governance in Asia Pacific, and we found out that actually local, national, and also basin organization they face a number of governance challenges, including, for example, limited implementation of water policies when it comes to preservation of water for 50% of 48 Asian Pacific countries, challenges in relation to funding and human resources, but also, for example, in terms of uptake of water policies in relation to trade-off. 79% of Asian Pacific country survey has no policy instrument to allocate groundwater extraction. So we believe that through this project, which next slide and last, please, which can last slide, please. So if you can move to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. So what are we doing at the OECD is to promote this project on the blue economy through, let's say, three main messages. So the first one is think global and act local in order to mitigate water-related risks and improve resilience of local economy. Second is connect the dots between coastal cities and basins to allocate action for the development of nature-based solutions. And third, make sure that for promoting a sustainable blue economy, we get the water governance right, which means through funding mechanism to support marine and freshwater protection, develop a partnership with private actors, create synergies across the sectors, so water with waste, energy, and land planning. We are now in the second phase of the project implementation. We have just launched a global survey on localizing the blue economy in collaboration with a number of umbrella organizations like C40, UCLG, Resilient City Networks, and many others. For our next milestones, that would be COP27 in November. The project will end in 2024 at the World Water Forum in Bali. So we invite Asian Pacific partners to contribute to this project, to reach out if they're interested in knowing more and getting more information about it. So thank you very much for your information. In the next slide, you can find my contact details. Thank you.
Thank you, Oriana, introducing your new initiative reflecting the OECD's water governance 12 indicator. And also thank you so much for reminding us about your governance analysis outcome of Outdoor 2020. Now we try to do our best to contribute to your initiative in showing the case study of Asia. The perspective of circularity is also very, very important to enhance quality growth in Asian Pacific. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Fanny, Regional Coordinator of GWP Southeast Asia, to present your initiative. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Yumiko-san. So, hi everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this important session. My name is Pani Wedahuditama, and I'm going to present on building resilience water security through improved integrated water governance. So some of my slide will be have the same information as Oriana has already presented. So let me start. So 2 months ago, as Yumiko Asayama-san mentioned before, the Asia Pacific Water Forum organized the 4th Asia Pacific Water Summit in Kumamoto, Japan. So the overall key message of the summit is that the water sector should transform itself in 3 key areas if we hope to achieve the water security and SDG. So these 3 key areas are the science and technology, governance, and finance. So as you can see here, all these three key areas are the foundation of development, fundamental element, not only for the water sectors, but also for the other development sector. So, but also we can learn also from the report from the SDG 6.5.1 around 2020, on the implementation of IWRM. Here again, the governance once again become a critical key areas that all the water related actions in the country should build upon. And then as Oriana has already mentioned, from AUDO, from Asia Water Development Outlook 2020, again, the report emphasized the critical role of the governance in achieving water security. So I'm not going to explain this one by one. However, both of these report are complementing with each other, and these two reports also very helpful for the country to inform about the overall pictures of the governance. Also, one of them, Now, but in practical, we also need to look into a more detailed analysis that should be done at the country level to be able to inform the country on what are the practical steps in improving the country's water governance. So through this presentation, I would like to invite everybody here to discuss an idea on how we can move forward to make sure the inclusive, sustainable and resilient governance is in place. I personally think that it is time for us to go to the detail level and stop discussing at the normative level, because I think we have enough already at that level, and now we can go to the detail. By the way, I call this idea a water governance improvement initiative. This is just an idea, so we can discuss it together. Okay, so how should we do this? So based on the previous report, based on the previous slides that you have seen, so I think it is important for us to really understand governance in a simple way. So first, then let's make it simple. Governance is the act or process of governing something. So allow me to use a basketball game to illustrate what governance is. So to be able to play the basketball game, we need to a set of the rule. We call it rule of the game. And this rule of the game can guide us on how we organize and play the game. Now, this is what we meant by regulatory framework. This is related to the policy and regulation and so on. Now, once the rules are set, we need to also define the players, the referee, the coach, the clubs, and so forth, along with the authority and the responsibility and the kind of resources that they can use. So this is what we meant by institutional arrangement or institutional framework. Now, after this is done, then the next thing that we need to set for us to be able to play and organize the game is to make sure that the fund is available, the mechanism to channel the fund to pay all the activities related to the game, related to the water sector here in this case, and the incentive and disincentive mechanism is also available. It's also in place. This is what we meant by financial framework. Now, the next one is the infrastructure and technological framework. So when we play the game, when we play the basketball, you need the infrastructure, you need the ring, you need the many things, all this infrastructure. So in order to do this, in order to have this, then we need to also ensure that the design of the infrastructure and the technology used to play the game, to organize the game, should be complying to the rule of the game that we have already set in the beginning. Now, this is what we meant by technological and infrastructure framework. And then the last one is the knowledge management and communication framework. So when we play the game, when we do the activity for the development of the water sector, many data and information will emerge. Now, all this data information has to be captured, managed, and communicated to all the key stakeholders. So this is why we need to have this knowledge management and communication framework. This is also, we can say this is like a monitoring and evaluation aspect, Now, basically all the countries, basically they have their own water governance. Yeah, because if you don't have that water governance, you cannot do any water activity, water relevant activity. But the problem is how enabling and how effective is that water governance. So to understand in a more detail on how we are going to implement this or improve the water governance, then we need to put the water governance under our a microscope, yeah, and then we need to look at the detail. So we should understand that water governance is just not one big bubble. Within the water governance that we are usually mentioned, yeah, there are many mini water governance within it. So water for environment, water for people, water for economy and development, water related disaster risk reduction. They have their own water governance. They have their own regulatory framework. They have their own institutional setting in every team. So therefore, we need to understand that water governance is not just one big bubble, because we often discuss water governance as a one big term, yeah. No, but we need to go into detail that we need to understand this. And the issue here is that how coherent this water governance, the mini water governance, one another. That's why I call here also the need to have the integrated water governance. Now, so my proposal to be able to understand how coherent or how incoherent the water governance that is already in place, then we need to do this governance assessment for every team. So for water DRR, for water for people, for every team, we need to assess first. Now, so once we have done the assessment of each team, then we can the next step is to identify and review the cross-cutting element across the team. So for example, if we are talking about the regulation, what kind of regulation should apply to all the teams, to all the water for environment, water for people? What are this regulation at what level? So this is something that I meant by a cross-cutting element, yeah. Now, if we have already identified that, then we are ready right now for the next step, which is to start to do the gap analysis for every element, for the regulation, and then for every team. And then based on that gap analysis, then we can identify all the action that we need to close the gap, which we'll then put together as a water governance improvement action plan. And then once the action plan is there, we can implement it, of course. Now, now it would be good if the implementation of this water governance improvement initiative can be measured and can be compared from one country to another country. So this is just an illustration, yeah. Therefore, we can develop. We would like to suggest that maybe it's good to develop this water governance index based on the approach that we have already presented before. Now, but this is just an illustration. We are open to discuss now.
So
Understanding.
finally, going for closing.
Yeah, okay. I just have this slide and another slide. Now, understanding our water governance status is one thing, but improving the status of the other is another thing. So support facility in each country where the stakeholders can access the facility whenever they need support, I think it's important. I cannot explain about this support facility. Maybe we can discuss later. But again, it will never be perfect. So let's try to make it work. So thank you for your attention. Looking forward to discuss with you.
Thank you, Fanny, for introducing the 5 framework for IWRM governance and also the step for moving forward. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Mori Noriyuki. He is the Deputy Director of ICHAM Japan. Mori-san, floor is for yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Yes, so thank you, San. My name is Noriyuki Mori. I come from Japan. ICHAM is the acronym of the International Center for Water Hazard and Risk Management. And today, I'd like to talk about our research of science and technology for climate resilient society. And firstly, I'd like to introduce a mission on the program of the ICHAM very briefly. ICHAM was established in 2006 as a Category 2 center of the UNESCO IHP. And our mission is to serve the global excellence for the water hazard and risk management. And we conduct three pillars of the activities, including innovative research, effective capacity building, and efficient information networking. And so this is some excerpt of the key concept or key words from our long-term program. We are conducting the innovative research by taking an end-to-end approach, which includes the entire research process from data collection to analysis, assessment, and prediction of the natural phenomena to socio-economic impact. And also concerning the capacity building, we provide the programs to help the local expert for further development capacities needed. And also, so we provide the training for the local experts to become the facilitators who can provide the practical idea on site to improve the resilience and sustainability on the community. And also, we are promoting the innovation networking in collaboration with the many various related entities. For instance, UNESCO or WMO, UNDRR, and many academics and governmental organizations. And also, as already mentioned, so fourth Asian Pacific Water Summit was held in Kumamoto, Japan in April. And at that time, so the key statements were adopted, including the Kumamoto Declaration and chair summary. And this is some excerpt of the keywords from this one. And especially related to the science and technology, in the declaration, it mentioned that explore what role science and technology should play in the cross-sectorial decision-making of leaders. And also in the chair summary, so it mentioned that promote water cycle resilience by accelerating open science policy, especially focusing on the observation, modeling, and data integration, and also the foster facilitators, and also working together beyond the discipline and sectors with taking an end-to-end approach. And based on and in line with these missions, programs, and also key ideas, and we are doing the research activities by an end-to-end approach, including the hazard prediction, impact evaluation, and operational simulation, and risk assessment, and risk communication. These are some image of these activities. And now, so I'd like to introduce several examples of our research activities. And this is the development of the agriculture management support system by integrating the agriculture simulation model and hydrological model and remote sensing data. This is the output of the test simulation in Pampanga River Basin in Philippines, which predict the rice plant growth. And also, this is another example of our research. And this is development of the operation support system for hydropower dams. And usually, hydropower dam does not have the flood control function, but by harnessing the advanced rainfall prediction system and hydrological runoff model, we may be utilize the hydropower dams for the flood control with no loss of the power generation. And actually, so this is some test simulation done to the some hydropower dams in Japan. And in this simulation, we can find that so even in this the hydropower dam, we can reduce the flood peak by using the rainfall prediction system. And also, sometimes we can increase the power generation. So this is some result of the simulation. Next is this is an activity for the local resilience and sustainability conducted at Kumamoto City in Japan, and especially to enhance the community preparedness for the flood disaster. We conducted a workshop with participants from local community and related organizations by using the flood simulation result and virtual reality videos. It is to experience and understand the situation of the flood virtually, but with good reality. We hope that this activity will enhance the cultivation of the imagination of the future disaster, and also so the choice of the most appropriate action at the time of the emergency. And finally, so this is the example of the online synthetic system for the sustainability and resilience. We call it OSSSR. Actually, so this is the example in the Davao River Basin in Philippines. And in this case, on the data integration and analysis system, we call it DS in Japan. So we developed the real-time flood monitoring and forecasting system and climate change impact assessment system. And also by using this system and data and the DS, so we developed the e-learning system and provide the training for the facilitators, total 31 facilitators in the Davao River Basin, including the officials, government officials from the national government or local government, and academia or media or NGOs, etc. And we are doing the similar activities in other Asian countries, such as Indonesia and Sri Lanka. So today I introduce our research activities by taking an end-to-end approach and also integration of the data analysis from the various disciplines and sectors. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mori-san, for your presentation, including all the emphasis of the output of the fourth Asia Pacific Summit, Kumamoto Declaration, and Chair Summary. And I also thank you so much for your approach to enhance end-to-end approach, including how you are conducting the capacity to enhance facilitator of each Asia Pacific region using the case of the Philippines and so on. And next, I would like to invite Mr. Michael To, Director, Industry and Technology Collaboration, Singapore Public Utility Board. So, Michael, floor is for yours.
Yeah, thank you, Yumiko. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Happy to join all of you today. The work of the Asia Pacific Water Forum and its members resonates very much with us, and I think today's session is very timely amidst the various terrible weather episodes that we are seeing across the world. Next slide, please. Back, two more, one more. Go back. Just one more. Just the slide before this. Yes, correct. Yeah. So let me quickly just go on. I think in the 50s and 60s, we also had our water challenges. We had polluted waterways, we had floods, and last but not least, we had poor sanitation. The sewage infrastructure was inadequate, and many communities were served by night soil collection. Next, please. But today, Singapore is very different. I think many of you who have been here know that this has not come easy. Next, please. From independence, water is a national priority. Our founding Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, once said that water dominated every other policy, and every other policy had to bend at the knees of water survival. It is an existential issue for Singapore, and the government places a lot of emphasis on water management to ensure that Singapore does not go thirsty. Next, please. We have come some way, but there are new challenges. rising water demand, growing population, and economic growth, climate change, rising sea level. For those of you who have been to Singapore, Singapore is very flat. We are pancake flat and a very low-lying island. So any rise in sea level poses a threat to Singapore. We also need to look at ways to reduce the use of energy and decarbonize as we produce more water. We also need to reduce waste, recover resources from waste streams during our treatment. Next, please. So we at PUB, we are clear of our mission. We need to make sure that no one ever goes thirsty in Singapore and the water is safe to drink. We do so by the 4 national taps or diversified water supply. We also collect every drop or use water for reclamation. We continue to increase our drainage capacity to deal with more intense storms brought about by climate change. And more recently, in 2020, we took on the role of a coastal protection agency. Next, please. Given all this, I think there are many schools and we have learned from people, but I think we have distilled down to 3 key strategies in managing our water. First, adequacy. Adequacy to us means that we must have enough. In Singapore's case, we must have enough capacity to meet every demand, being able to treat every drop of sewage, and being able to cope with storms and to prevent flooding. We also need to be resilient. Resilience is about being tough, being resistant to the shocks in the system like the COVID experience that we all had, and being able to recover quickly should there be a disruption or disturbance. And finally, sustainability. Sustainability to us means we do not become too expensive or too cumbersome to work after a short while. Next, please. So in 2003, we started treating waste water into high-grade reclaimed water, what we call new water. And Singapore, being an island state surrounded by the sea, in 2005, we started desalinating water. Both new water and desalination are not subject to weather uncertainties. They are important sources for us to bring resilience to prolonged periods of dry weather. The addition of these 2 sources of water has allowed us to close the water loop and to capture every drop of water that falls on Singapore endlessly. Next, please. A little bit about new water. This, I think most of you have seen it, is high-grade reclaimed water that surpasses WHO drinking water guidelines and is suitable for drinking without further treatment. To us, it is the answer to SDG 6, cushioning our water supply against dry weather and moving Singapore towards water sustainability. Today, we have 5 new water plants in Singapore, 3 of which are operated by private sector through a PPP, public-private partnership tender. And most recently, next please, we have a new product called New Brew, which we believe is Singapore's greenest beer and is brewed using new water. Next, please. But we need to do more. We have invested a lot in securing today's water supply, but we need to plan far ahead. So we project into the future where we expect in 2060, we need to more than double our water needs. So we have to make sure that the demand is met, and most of the water will come from high-tech sources, which are climate independent. Therefore, new water and desalination is costly and energy intensive to produce. Next, please. To better prepare ourselves for the future, we invest a lot in R&D. We want to increase our water resources, reduce energy and waste generation, and to improve water quality. So we share this openly, getting the industry to be with us and to work with us, and we prepare the technology roadmap so that everyone knows what Singapore needs. Next, please. We also recognize that PUB cannot do it alone. We need to work with the industry to address our future challenges. So this includes local and international companies. We work with them, we grow with them, and Singapore has a vibrant water industry to help us achieve our mission. Next, please. Apart from that, we also want to build a home for interesting water technology companies because we know that many of them are small, entrepreneurial, and needs a place to start off. So we have a launch pad called the Singapore Water Exchange for new startups, and a landing pad for companies from all over the world to help Singapore solve its problem. Therefore, we have 33 companies in the Singapore Water Exchange, and we welcome everyone to join us, be part of this ecosystem. Next, please. But beyond that, we need to cooperate globally. I think we want to learn from and share with many global stakeholders like many of you here. I think no country can tackle its futures alone. The challenges that we face is similar to many others. So we keep abreast with technology and we want to learn from you. So we participate actively in international forums like the Asia Pacific Water Summit. And the next slide, please. We want to do more, right? We have just collaborated with ADB on the Resilience Water Hub, but we want to also create our own platform where you can come, share with us what you know, share with us so that we can also learn and adopt it here in Singapore. So we welcome you to join us in 2024 at the Singapore International Water Week. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Michael. And I also thank you for PUB to supporting APW activity. Thank you. And also thank you so much for sharing Singapore water journey to improve water security and strengthen climate resilience with your a new initiative to promote circular economy and circular resources with Singapore resources. That's the case of public PPP, not only in Singapore and global scale. Example is also very, very useful to learn more from our side. Thank you. And next and the final presenter is from Asian Development Bank. We will have two presenters. One is Mr. Alessio, Senior Water and Climate Change Specialist, and Ms. Yasmin Siddiq, Director, Environment, Natural Resources and Agricultural Development Division, Central and West Asia Department. Now, floor is for yours. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Yumiko. And let me start by saying that I'm truly honored to be here presenting and discussing about water resilience, how to mainstream water resilience for who needs the most, who are our people living on the ground and the agencies that operate on the ground. Next slide, please. Let me start by highlighting some of the challenges that our region is facing. Well, all of us knows that climate change is mainly felt through water, and changes in the water cycle, intensification of the water cycles like flood and drought. And this, of course, has an effect on economic activities that depends on water. For example, agriculture. Agriculture, for example, consumes in average 70% of freshwater resources. And you can imagine that changes in the water cycle, intensification of the water cycle will, of course, have an effect on agriculture and therefore also on food security, which, of course, is strictly linked to agriculture. If you look at water supplies and sanitation, well, in our region, we still have 500 million of people that do not have access to basic water supplies and 1.14 billion of people without access to sanitation. Again, changes in the water cycle will, of course, affect these people even further. And as already highlighted in some of previous presentation, the trends also towards the future is, for example, identification towards more urbanizations. And this will, of course, further aggravate the problem. If you look from a nature perspective, well, nature is, of course, one of the best assets that we have to face changes in climate and become more resilient through, for example, wetlands, nature-based solutions, and so on. Unfortunately, many of these assets are being damaged or being lost. Last but not least, water is not only becoming more scarce, but water quality is also deteriorating. For example, 80% of urban wastewater is discharged untreated. And also climate change, like salinity intrusion, of course, further aggravate the problem. Next slide, please. What is ADB doing to tackle some of these challenges? Well, we have a document, ADB Strategy 2030, which is our strategic document. And there, tackling climate change is one actually of the 7 priorities of ADB. And in fact, is indirectly embedded in all our 7 priorities. Last year, also ADB, just prior to COP26, has raised the ambition to deliver climate financing from 80 billion to 100 billion cumulatively between 2019 and 2030. And this explicitly includes 34 billion on adaptation finance. Next slide, please. If we look a bit more in depth in our water portfolio, I'm part of the water sector group. We see that we have a portfolio in ADB water portfolio of about $26.5 billion cumulatively between 2011 and 2022. And this directly supports about 650 million people. If we look at the trends in our portfolio, we see, for example, a trend towards an increase in delivering climate financing. We also see some positive trends, for example, into increase in mainstreaming gender, also participation of the private sector, and private sector, of course, plays a crucial role in delivering some of the financing needed to tackle some of these challenges. And also increase in digitalization. Digitalization is also very important because increasing digitalization in the water sector means also increasing in efficiencies. And we have seen, for example, in the pandemic that organization or country that were more digitalized were also more resilient to shocks. Next slide, please. And here I would like just to highlight a couple of initiatives that we are currently doing in our group to mainstream water resilience. The first one, we have launched a guidance note, Mainstreaming Water Resilience in Asia and the Pacific, that essentially provides a number of like a guidance on how to embed increasing water resilience in water sector operation and policies. This is based on 6 pillars. And one of the pillars recommended the setting up of a hub, what we call the Asian Pacific Water Resilience Hub. Next slide, please. And this we have actually launched 2 weeks ago at our Asia Water Forum. And the hub is a platform that allows to connect, collaborate, and also capacitate water entities on the ground to become more resilient. And here is an open invitation to you all to actually participate to the hub. Either you can register to receive updates or join as a contributors in this journeys to help all our people and our entities to become more resilient. And the core of this hub is a repository where we share tools, we share knowledge product, and also we provide the training opportunities. And with this, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Yasmin. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessio, and thank you for doing a great job on setting the scene. So participants, my task is to now zoom in on the region that I cover, which is Central and West Asia. As you can see from this table, we've listed the countries, they're abbreviated in ADB style, but these are 10 countries ranging from Afghanistan all the way across to Uzbekistan, Central Asia, and the 3 Caucasus countries. So a very large region. But what I'd like to highlight is the vulnerabilities that this region has and faces to climate and natural hazards. And as you'll see from this chart, what we've looked at is the Notre Dame Gain Index and also the Inform Index to give some indication of where these countries rank according to each of these indices. So interestingly, with the Notre Dame, the ND Gain Index, you'll see that the country's vulnerability to climate change and its readiness to improve resilience is presented. Now, this covers, the Inform Index covers 191 countries, and it identifies the susceptibility of countries to risk for climate and geological hazards. So these are both important indices that we look at to guide decision-making processes. I'm just going to pick up on 2 countries, which I'm sure many of you can see from these indices, how high they are ranked in terms of vulnerability. So let's look at Afghanistan, which is 176th and 5th on those 2 indices. Afghanistan faces some of the highest levels of natural hazard risk in the world. It regularly experiences high maximum temperatures and it's prone to drought and heat stress. Many of you may be aware that most recently in the last few months, it's also had major flood impacts as well, highlighting the vulnerability of the country. And the other one I'll pick up is Pakistan, also ranking as a very vulnerable country. It's exposed to earthquakes and also high exposure to flooding. Again, as you would have seen in the press recently, it's experienced massive flooding across all of its provinces. So it shows to us that the region is at high vulnerability and at high risk to climate. And yet, majority of the people in these countries are reliant on agriculture and rural livelihoods as their key sources of income. So all of them facing high risks and vulnerabilities. Next slide, please. Now, on this chart, we've tried to assess the differences between the regional water demand and the availability of reliable water supplies, looking at, in the first bar, the situation today, the second bar, looking at 2050 with a business as usual approach, the third bar looking at rehabilitation of key infrastructure, and lastly, looking at climate resilient interventions. So just as you could see, just even if we look at it outwardly from number one, importantly, and as I mentioned in the last slide, consumers, which sectors are consuming the most water resources? In the orange, you can see that it's irrigation. So this re-emphasizes the reliance of this region on agriculture and irrigated agriculture. So that's where, if we're looking at the 2050 scenario, under the current conditions of business as usual, we're going to see this major deficit. And if we then look ahead at rehabilitation, without the climate aspects integrated and embedded in solutions, we see some improvement, but dramatically, if we look at the 2050 climate resilience scenario, this is really quite visually, as you can see, important and significant in that it can really improve the situation that we're looking at in future and safeguard our communities and users of water. Next slide, please. So what is ADB doing and how are we tackling what we've shown you in the previous two slides? Well, as mentioned already, we have some challenges. The availability of information and sectoral climate assessments is not available in all countries. And of course, this is a primary starting point, which will support us in looking at what type of interventions and project designs we can build into our pipelines looking ahead. Secondly, the climate assessment. Now, and this for me is the most interesting part, it has to start well upstream. So I often relate this, I don't know how many of you watch cricket, but often when there's a fast bowler in cricket, they have to take a long run up before they bowl the ball to get the wicket. In my opinion, if we're really looking at this climate as the wicket, then you have to take a long run up to make sure you're embedding climate risk assessment well upstream of the project design. And I believe that this is one of the most fundamental shifts that we need to make as practitioners, is coming up way upstream. We cannot start with a project and then try to just build on. That's not going to be good enough. Thirdly, we have knowledge gaps across our countries, within practitioners, within government agencies and other stakeholders. So knowledge is a really important area that we need to emphasize. And I'm very pleased that the colleagues on this panel today bring a lot of that knowledge, but also demonstrate how partnerships are very important to find solutions. And I believe one of our earlier presenters mentioned that climate is not to be tackled by one alone. We all need to join hands and deliver collectively. Lastly, in terms of challenges, it's the buy-in of our counterparts in government as well, to understand and to invest upstream on climate adaptation measures and sustainable water resources management. And I'm glad PUB presented some excellent initiatives and ideas which give much food for thought. So priority actions, Firstly, I'd like to share that ADB, our department, has recently approved a major regional technical assistance covering all 10 countries to deliver on a climate change strategy. This will include exactly the challenges above being addressed. So including work upstream, looking at sector assessments and building knowledge, but importantly, strengthening the capacity of our government counterparts and our staff and other stakeholders. We're also catalyzing regional cooperation through the Central Asia Regional Economic Cooperation Platform, the CAREC platform, which works across the region, across 11 countries to build knowledge and leverage partnerships. And lastly, very importantly, we're looking at identifying climate champions and institutionalizing climate context into our developing member countries. Last slide, please. So further to what are we doing, when I drill it down to the actual operational context even further, well, we've started on these upstream assessments, and I'm very pleased that in a few countries already, we're looking at some of this upstream work to identify some of the key risks, identify hotspots, look at the adaptation pathways, and then also look at the economic analysis on which we can then have a very strong rationale for suggesting and recommending to government counterparts why we should pick up particular interventions and why those would deliver the most in terms of climate adaptation. So here I've listed a few of the countries. In Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, we've recently commenced upstream activities on the climate risk assessment. And of course, through the regional technical assistance, we'll be doing more of this, not just for water sector, but for other sectors too. And secondly, looking at actually embedding into our pipeline, into actual operational delivery, we have a number of projects already which are being either developed or under implementation, which build in climate adaptation elements. And here I'd like to highlight again, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. We're awaiting the approval of the Climate Adaptive Water Resources Management Project. We're hoping for that to be approved next week, but that's really built in many features in irrigation and drainage systems to look at climate change adaptation, and also to look at the macro level water resources management and how we can safeguard water resources in a country such as Uzbekistan that is heavily and entirely reliant on upstream water resources. Georgia is another country where we're working closely with the government on looking at a climate smart irrigation project. And of course, side by side, and to stress here that the importance of capacity building of government counterparts, stakeholders within the country and within ADB itself as well is critical to delivering on all of these areas. So I'll stop there. I believe that's the end of the presentation, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
So thank you, Alessio and Yasmin, to introduce ADB's initiative and sharing your lesson and experience to tackle the issue for climate resilience and using the case study of West Asia and Central Asia. And now we would like to move on to the panel discussion. So we can conduct panel discussion about 15 minutes from now. Then I now would like to invite Ms. Chanfa Wu, our APWF Vice Governing Council Chair. She will be the moderator of this session with to coordinate well for all our speakers. Thank you, Chanfa. Floor is for yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Yumiko, and also thank you everyone for sharing very insightful and rich knowledge, information, your expertise, as well as wisdom there. So I am honored to MC this panel discussion in the absence of our beloved late chair, my dear colleague, friend, and role model, Mark Pascoe, whose sudden passing has definitely saddened us all and left a huge vacancy in the water security arena in our region and globally, and we miss him dearly. Now let me get onto the business. And I'm really impressed with all the presenters, speakers, and I think to a large extent we managed to address this topic called end-to-end approach to valuing water. And thank you for decoding that in many, many ways, because this topic is really all encompassing, everything literally in it. So thank you very much for that. In a short sort of conversation type of way, I'm going to throw some questions directly to our speakers. Let me start with Oriana. And thank you for the introduction from European perspective. In the end-to-end sort of conversation, your presentation, there's one piece of puzzle which is not adequately addressed, is about finance. So out of curiosity, how your initiatives, this blue economy, city, those angles reflected in your taxonomy, which is a sort of the core part of the finance, actually public finance in particular, in the Green Deal. If you could shed a little bit of insight on that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. So indeed, financing is one of the key components of the project. We see financing underneath the overall pictures of water governance. In fact, our framework relates to the OECD principles of water governance, which are made of 12 must-do for government at all levels and in coordination with a variety of stakeholders. Principle 6, namely, is about making the financing work. Within the water sector, not only there is a huge infrastructural gap of $7 trillion by 2050, if we consider both infrastructure for water resources and water services, so drinking water and sanitation. But what we are looking in this project in particular for the blue economy is not only infrastructure, but is also how what are the innovating financing mechanisms that can actually help shifting towards a sustainable, resilient, and circular blue economy. So this could be, for example, blue bonds, or it could be related to carbon capture, could be related to new types of financing from the private sector, so collaboration between the public and the private. So the idea is to dig deeper into what are the innovating financial mechanisms, taking into account that all the shocks, and I'm mentioning the COVID-19 crisis as one of the most recent one, have also reduced, let's say, the public funding. So what are the next steps and how we can make sure that public and private can work together? And this is something that we would dig deeper into the project.
Thank you very much. And my next question is to Fanny. Your idea is very, very ambitious, and by knowing that we've been learning from OECD, the governance index. If you listen to Michael's presentation, like Singapore is pretty much sort of integrated, and besides ADB and others, actually everyone seems to be doing sort of governance is everywhere, right? It's important to sort of get foundational level and for us to deliver the goals. So my question to you is, based on this complex landscape out there, and then here comes Fanny or GWP's really this ambition. What is the biggest differentiator or value adds you would really describe for the new idea? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think the big addition is first is that when we go to the detail level, then we see the complexity is very enormous, and we need to raise the awareness of this complexity, because then you also, if you look at the presentation that I had, there are mini water governance that we need to inform the country that this has to be developed in an integrated way. in a coherent way. So this is this idea will help them to understand. Will help the country to understand that okay, there is this complex. And then the other thing is that to go through this complexity, then there is this a way, a very simple way, a step-by-step things that we can apply. So it doesn't mean that that kind of complexity we will not be able to address, but with that kind of complexity, we need just to know one step at a time. How is it that we need to do in the few steps? For example, if you are talking about the regulatory framework, for example, we have been talking about that every country have this water resources law, but then there is a question also whether this water resources law is equal to the other law, and if it's equal, then what happens if the other law support an activity that will negate what we do in the water sector? So this kind of thing through this ID will be also dissected, and then will be also looked at, and then also will be how do you say discussed, and then try to find out what are the solution for that. Now that would be the additional thing that this ID will bring. But this is just like this is just an idea, so we can discuss further with everybody. Yeah,
thank you very much. That's really helpful. Definitely, I think within APWF network, you definitely already have a lot of partners to work with you on that. So thank you. Next, my question to Dr. Mori, and very often I think decision makers making decision or policy whatever based on backward-looking data, historic data. But from climate change perspective, and we definitely have to more like forward-looking. Obviously, from ICHARM's perspective, you've been already doing that. I would like to hear a little bit more from you, your suggestion, recommendation, or thoughts in terms of, this is sort of balancing historic data, and also future data. At the end of the day, we do need to deliver resilience, but then say how resilient you can call to resilient. Right? There's a huge uncertainty there. So if you could shed a little bit sort of ideas or thoughts to articulate sort of this complexity of, time horizon, space horizon, this is sort of data in order to really support the decision makers, both about, public and private sector, as well as the investment community, so that they will be able to really make impactful, meaningful, decisions, to deliver resilience. Thank you.
Thank you, Xiang Ha, for your question. And concerning the climate change impact, yes, also we should consider such impact, of course. But as you know, so to taking into account such climate change impact to the actual, so for example, flood control planning or drought management planning and so on. So many plenty of data and also the some modeling and simulation is very necessary. And actually, so in case of Japan, in the past, only now, so 5 years or such like this years ago, until 5 years ago. So we only consider basically consider the historical data in the past, and based on the historical data, we set up the basic plan and the long-term plan for the river management. But as you know, so due to the climate impact, so now we are experience the big flood disaster very frequently, even in Japan or even in the world, other area. That's why so we changed the such policy, and so now so we considering taking into account such climate change impact. For instance, so based on the IPCC model report, so now so we are going to set up the such policy and plan for the flood control based on the assumption of the 2 degrees Celsius temperature rise. But actually, so such policy change happened thanks to some advanced technology for the simulation and computing capacity and so on. So yeah, of course, so we should consider the balance, the historical data and prediction data. But from now on, we can utilize such advanced technology for the simulation, modeling, and data collection by using the not only the ground data, observation data, but also by using the satellite data. So we can accumulate such data, and also so we can do the prediction more accurately or precisely. So in that case, so we should move to the to take into account, consider the such climate change impact to the actual policy or actual planning. So this is our idea to deal with such impact. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mori. Next, I'm going to ask Michael. And Singapore, in many, many ways, we all know, is literally a role model, even from the end-to-end sort of approach. And from your presentation, I realized, when I was, 2060 Singapore, you have pretty much sort of thought out the plan, the pathway, the vision. And as you mentioned, the climate change will be a potential major risk, actually, to Singapore, because as an island state, sea level rising, intensifying extreme weather events, whatever. Besides that, what are there maybe another way or another risk out there that you have to really take into consideration when you are traveling towards a 2060, right? When I was listening to, I was like, yeah, I have to think about something I wouldn't be able to, right? And so I'm out of curiosity, and beside the physical climate risk, what else actually out there you feel like potentially that could sort of, I wouldn't say derail your agenda, but somehow slow down or whatever. So anything like that you would like to share with us? Thank you.
Thank you, Changhua. You always give very, very tough question, and that's a very, very important question. I don't have a crystal ball to look in and anticipate what are the challenges ahead. But I think one of the things that we try to do here borders on really having a long-term vision. I think in the example of Newater, which we brought up just now, we started it long time ago. I think when we started, we were dealt the cards that we have. We don't have natural water sources. We don't have natural aquifers, groundwater. We don't have beautiful streams. We had to rely on rainfall and water from Malaysia. So we recognize that we need to be self-reliant. So at that time in the 70s, we already started asking ourselves, can we use reclaimed water? And at that time, the cost was high and technology was unreliable. And over time, we continue to work hard at it, monitor it. And membrane technology has radically improved in the 90s, by the 90s. And it has cost cheaper, substantially cheaper. And therefore, in 1998, we make a big push to test. And in 2003, we have a product. I think what I'm alluding to is that I think we can't really predict the future, but I think by having a robust and open system, being open to ideas, being open to solutions, I think it has enabled us, even being dealt with the situation that we have, to be able to manage the thing that we have. But we are constantly lookout. I think very often we are accused of being paranoid. So we are very much conscious. I think there are many things ahead, but I think there are also many things for us to learn through such platforms like APWS, the summit, the Asia Water Forum by ADB, the Stockholm World Water Week, and our own Singapore International Water Week. So we keep ourselves open, we keep ourselves lower the barriers of learning for everyone in PUB so that we can get ready for such eventualities. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a big part of your resilience as well. Thank you. Yeah. Now I'm going to ask Alexio. And so why capacity building on water resilience is the need of the hour? And how can the Water Resilience Hub facilitate this endeavor? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Changwa. Good question. And I think I would like to start by saying that if you look at resilience, water resilience, climate resilience, I mean, the people that really feel the effect of climate change are mainly the people really on the ground. And also the last IPCC report was quite clear on that. In fact, there was a lot of emphasis in looking into impact to local people and also regionalized type of impact different from one region to another region. So if you want to do something, you want to change that, of course, you have to really work at the local level. And the hub is really trying to do that, really try to mainstream resilience at the local level and building capacities. So in that sense, it will really help. And something more also I would like to mention is the fact that if you look into adaptation, of course, you can adapt, but it's also important that the local people or agency operating on the ground, they feel ownership for what is being proposed. So it's not ADB, for example, that is proposing adaptation option in a country, but the people living in the country, the agencies operating on the country, they have to feel ownership for what is being proposed. So in that sense, it is really important that their skills, the capacity is being further developed in order that they can become more resilience in the long term. I hope this answers your question. Thank you.
Excellent answer as well. Thank you. Now to Yasmin, and which mechanisms are being adopted to encourage ADB clients to consider more climate adaptive solutions and how we can leverage greater buy-in? Thank you.
Thank you, Changwa. And maybe this builds on Alessio's point. I'll probably take it from Alessio's last point, which is sort of the building blocks of how we initiate change from the ground level upwards to decision makers. Engaging at the ground level very much, we of course collectively, and I mean collectively with all those on this call as well, are doing our contribution to working with communities and particularly the most vulnerable people within those communities who are largely going to have the most disproportionate impacts of climate on them. And so through our projects on the operational side and through our technical assistance support as ADB, we work together with partners at the ground level. So working with international agencies, non-government organizations, CSOs, and government to target the person in the village. For example, often we're working with women in communities, in remote rural communities, who are largely going to be those who are going to face the biggest impacts. So it's about granularity to some extent to understand who is the impacted one, identifying them, and we have many mechanisms within the organization for ensuring that we target. And we also have resources which we can target very specifically. For example, ADB's Asian Development Fund 13 cycle has thematic windows which are available for gender and climate and disaster risk resilience. And then building upwards, of course, there's the internal knowledge and capacity building, which we do through, fortunately, Alessio and our Chief of Water, Nita, and other colleagues who work to train us across other departments as well. And then with our clients, the decision makers on where does financing go, I believe that this is where we need perhaps some of the greatest emphasis because while climate appears in the NDC, the national action plans and cascading downwards into policy, it's about how do you translate policy into actions, into operational actions. So through, again, technical assistance support, but importantly, and I believe this is where it is important to engage with all, often it's the ministries of finance that hold the purse string. I always say that they're the ones with the purse in their hand who are going to decide how that financing is distributed. So important not just to engage at the sector level, but with the Ministry of Finance, the decision maker, and work with them on capacity as well. So I'll stop there, Chenghua.
Thank you. Thank you. Great answer as well. Yeah, I'm aware of the time constraint, and now I'm going to pass the baton actually to my co-vice chair, Eduardo Aurora, who's also associate professor, Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, to help. Probably, Eduardo, you can do both for the sake of saving time and your reflection, as well as to help actually conclude this session as well. Thank you, Eduardo.
Thank you very much, Changhua. It's good to see you again. It's good to be back in the community after having been away for almost one year. I learned a lot listening to the presentations today. I like the breadth and the focus. I particularly like Yasmin's points about the 4 main challenges. And I think that's not only for Central Asia, but I think that's all over the world. Especially the last point of how do you convince the Ministry of Finance people to give you more money now that they have less money after COVID, the economy is weak, so on and so forth. And here we are trying to convince them to invest more money in the long term. And there's a lot of uncertainty. And you're asking a lot of money and say, why should we give you more money? We're not sure about the modeling. We're not sure about the results, and so on and so forth, all right? And here we have the case, we hear the case about Singapore. Singapore has already thought about this problem and has decided that in the next 100 years, Singapore will put in $100 billion, regardless of what happens. And I think my friend and colleague Michael mentioned a lot of things that Singapore has done, but I think I should highlight one principle that Singapore is following in terms of climate financing. And that is, it should be treated like the way you finance the military. Good times and bad times, you should put in money to your military. You just don't know what will happen. So it's a constant stream of investment. You don't haggle, you don't negotiate. The Minister of Finance don't negotiate with the Defense Department when they request arms upgrade. So I think that should be an important principle that ministers should remember. And because time is running out, we would be happy to have conversation with the Ministry of Finance people to think about climate financing. Think about we know ADB would soon become a climate bank. We hear this very loudly, and all the things that we discuss here, from the projects of iCharm to Fanny's institutional work, OECD's work, would all be helpful. And every bit of work that improves decision making, every bit of work that helps convince the Minister of Finance to put in more money on water and climate investments, and how we use all our analytic tools to convince the ministers to be more climate friendly, would all be welcome. So it is in that spirit that I enjoyed listening today. Of course, let me conclude by saying many thanks as usual to our super colleague who runs our APWF and makes us all engaged. Yumiko, where are you? You are there. So we give you our thanks as usual for bringing us again, and as we emerge in the pandemic. And we hope to see you, if not in Singapore in 2024, we hope to see you again, and we can carry on with our important conversation on water and climate change. Thank you very much, Changhua.
So I guess this pretty much concludes what we've been discussing. The topic is so huge, we can carry on forever. Thanks again on behalf of the APWF and our partners. This is a great session. Thank you, and stay in touch and stay safe. Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah,
thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Changhua. Thank you,
Okay,
Yumiko.
bye-bye. Take care. Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.